Right, guys, we are going for it. So thank you for coming along. Um, this session is very much, we're hoping to be a collaborative session towards the end to hear your views and your insights on the current situation, mainly around transforming care and people being stuck or trapped in hospital. We, as part of Catalyst Care Group, over the last 10 years, our focus has been on getting people out of hospital and stopping people from being admitted in the first place. And we went on a journey 2 or 3 years ago and we thought, right, actually, we're having a lot of conversations with families, with individuals who have been detained under the Mental Health Act, with support workers, with clinical teams, MDTs, with commissioners. And people seem to be saying very similar things about the challenges, but we couldn't find anything out there other than statutory information through NHS England and ADAS that brought everyone's views together in one place to almost take a snapshot of the state of transforming care. So this is our second year running our white paper survey, and today is just about sharing some of those results and asking some questions towards the end. So we're going to start here. Does anyone recognise this building? Winterbourne View.
Yeah.
So who was practicing around that time, 15 years ago?
I was remembering colleagues in Wolverhampton that were looking at the outcomes from Winterbourne and looking at meeting people from residential. So I remember that quite clearly. I think Wendy Ewins was her name, had a big role in this. You know, Wendy. Yeah. Yeah. So I remember Winterbourne.
Okay. Well, let me tell you guys a story. So 15 years ago, I qualified as a learning disability nurse. I'd been a support worker for 7 years before that. I trained in Bristol and qualified in July 2010. And my first job was at Winterbourne View. I was there for about 6 or 7 weeks. The model was led by nurses, as many hospitals are when you're working on the ward. And I was very, very excited to go in and make a difference. I'd heard that Winterbourne had a poor reputation in the local community, but I also knew that actually once an organisation gets tarred with that brush, it's very difficult to shift it. And I knew members of the management team from previous roles working as a support worker in the local CLDT. So went in within probably a week to 10 days, knew that something wasn't right, encountered a closed culture immediately, went to management, went to safeguarding, went to the CQC, went to the police. Nothing happened. And so in December 2010, my colleague Terry and I contacted the BBC. And from there, we had the panorama investigation and all the filming that happened. And it sort of lifted the lid on a much bigger issue that we're now aware of. And what's really difficult is that we know that these closed cultures are still happening in hospitals, but also now in the community where people are discharged on very high support ratios. There's always that risk of a closed culture forming. So the issue is there. What did Winterbourne do for me? Well, it just sparked this fire to go out and do something about the issue. And I knew then that I wanted to be part of something that got people out of hospital and stopped people from going in. So I met the chief exec of Catalyst back in 2015, and over the last 10 years, we built Catalyst to do just that. So it was a huge catalyst for me personally, and that's why we decided to create this white paper so that everyone had the same information across the whole space of the sector. Recently, I also completed the level 5 commissioning for wellbeing qualification And the reason for getting you guys involved today is also because I know that that's just theory, and there's a lot more, it's a lot more complex commissioning in real life when it comes to getting people out of hospital. So your voices in all of this really, really matter. So why this session? Well, we need to be commissioning more creatively when it comes to discharge planning. We're interested in the impact of ineffective discharges on people and their families, and also the wider systems. And the key themes from our 2024 white paper were barriers. What are the barriers to timely discharges? What is the actual cost of the delays that happen? Some people delayed for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What is the human cost? What's the social cost? And obviously, we need to be very, very mindful now with the current economic climate around the financial cost. And what might the opportunities be for integrated and flexible commissioning? So a couple of stories here. You guys might be aware of these individuals as well. And I've just highlighted some words here that really stick out. So M is a young man with a learning disability. He is autistic, detained in hospital at the age of 15, despite that hospital being ill-equipped to meet his needs. He was detained for 444 days. He experienced inadequate care, leading to unmet basic needs, including proper diet and health checks. And as a result, his mental health and his physical health deteriorated significantly and rapidly. Where was his family in all of this? They faced a huge amount of resistance from hospital staff when they were advocating for appropriate care. They managed to, so I know this family, they managed to get this young man moved to a different hospital where he experienced LTS, long-term seclusion, or as we call it now through the restraint reduction network, solitary confinement in effect. And, it's just another case that highlights some of the systemic failures, which are not to do with the people involved in a person's care, it's to do with the way that systems are set up. And another case study here by the Challenging Behaviour Foundation. Again, I'm not gonna read it off the screen. I've just picked out some words here that seem to be recurring themes for a lot of the people who are stuck in hospital. And I guess the question is, are they stuck, or are our systems sticky? There's a difference. But here we hear about delays in funding, fragmented commissioning, his eventual discharge, and this person is in the middle of all of this, and the impact on their family is huge. And we know that, and there must be better ways that we can get people discharged back home into their own homes and their own communities, but we know it's not straightforward. So we had a couple of hundred people respond to the survey, and we built it in 3 sections. So we had a survey that was built for families and individuals to respond to. We had a section for support workers, allied health professionals, commissioners, nurses to respond to, and we had a completely separate section for commissioners to respond to. So the key findings from the families and individuals, 80% of the respondents received community-based care prior to admission. 40% of the people that responded were admitted to hospital without a formal mental health diagnosis. That's huge. And we know that the Mental Health Act and the Mental Health Act bill is going through at the moment, which will make it illegal to detain someone unless they have a mental health diagnosis. But we fully expect to see some crossover, and there are still a few things that we need to iron out through the work with the Restraint Reduction Network when it comes to that policy. 60% of people felt uninformed about their admission process and their discharge plans. And families said naturally, delayed discharges led to anxiety, depression, and a huge amount of isolation. The other figure that really stands out is that only 40% of people who were admitted and their families were aware of their rights under the Mental Health Act, which is very, very scary. And families highlighted a lack of community-based care and delays in mental health assessments. Who's that? Is that Shen?
Yeah, I'm only thinking because I've got advocacy in my work program. I'm just wondering, you said they weren't aware of their rights, where the advocacy element comes into that. Because usually you'd have IMHA, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so that I think in theory that should happen. It's whether things are communicated to people in a way that works for them. Um, there are big gaps in how we communicate with people too. It's really, really tricky. But for families not to be aware was also eye-opening for us. Okay. So again, coming from our family responses, 30% of people were placed more than 300 miles away from home. 300 miles, that's the length of the UK, if not more. We, in the past, have worked with people who've been in hospital up in Newcastle when home has been Cornwall.
So
So,
it's further isolation, isn't it, from family? Yeah.
absolutely. Um, and you can't help but think that if services were there and available in their local area, how much faster people would recover. Is that Raymond?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is there any forensic elements involved in all these case studies?
I'm trying to think of within these two case studies, I don't think there were forensic backgrounds, but there are many people with forensic backgrounds and histories that we've worked with who, have gone through similar experiences. And I think what we see is people are spoken about and labeled as needing specialist forensic support when their offence was 20 years ago and they set fire to a piece of paper, right? And now on their records, it's arson. So, it is, and then those people, of course, when new providers then see their care plans or their pen pictures, they're like, no, we can't do forensic support in the community. So, yeah, lack of inclusion in decision making. I think we see this all the time. 60% of families felt excluded from the care planning process. Only 33% of families and individuals felt that their cultural needs were considered, and 50% felt that past trauma was overlooked. And this is the bit, and I put it in red because it just, it was like a gut punch. No one reported consistently feeling treated with compassion, dignity, and respect. So we've got a big issue out there. We then moved the survey on to what it was like for people who had left hospital and what their life looked like today. 100% of the people who came back received bespoke care either in their own home or with family, and they reported high satisfaction with that care. However, it came through that access to personalised care was very inconsistent. Families said naturally that their loved ones had, improved in terms of behavior and that kind of thing when they had support in their own environment. But no family member that responded felt that a full period of recovery had happened and that person wouldn't need support anymore. There was an element with all of our respondents where they explained that they felt their family member would need ongoing support. What we did see, however, which is encouraging, is where people were discharged on huge ratio care packages. For example, 5-to-1 support that had reduced significantly to 2-to-1 when the right approaches and the right care was in place, when people had PBS plans, when their life plans were being followed. So we are seeing those reductions in some areas of the country, not in others. And as we know, personalised care always does have a strong impact, but again, access to it remains very, very limited. We then gave our families and individuals some tick boxes and what they would recommend to the system. So 100% of families called for more highly trained care staff. 100% requested stronger communication with the local system. Families, half of families wanted better community integration opportunities for their loved ones. 75% wanted greater investment in local care services, and 75% urged for more personalised and trauma-informed care plans. When we moved the survey on to commissioning colleagues, these are the key themes when it came to barriers that came back to us. So probably unsurprisingly, 100% of commissioners said that resource constraints were an issue, a persistent lack of funding, and commissioners feeling like that really limited flexible person-centered solutions. We know that there is a lack of funding, but we also know that there are creative ways of commissioning out there. Chris, I know the work that you do with ISFs, it has really helped to save money in the long run, but also give people a better quality of life. So resource constraints, lack of community capacity, we know is absolutely huge. 80% of commissioners came back and said that their local markets were insufficient to meet the demand for people, and it ultimately led to unnecessary hospital admissions. 60% of commissioning professionals spoke about fragmented services. We have obviously just had the bombshell that NHS England is going to be abolished and it's going to be all change again, and things are going to be integrated into DHSC. So I'm sure that we will see even more change and more fragmentation before we get to some sense of normal. But poor collaboration equals poor outcomes for people. We also heard about rigid commissioning models, so inflexible contracts, restricting personalised support, and innovative solutions. So commissioners being forced to pick a provider that's on their framework that they know possibly doesn't meet this person's needs, but they can't go out of that framework. And communication issues, 40% came back and said that that was a challenge. Inconsistent engagement with providers. From a provider perspective, what we tend to see is very different approaches to market engagement and market shaping as well. So what we've seen is this shift in commissioning to from what I now know, having done the course, should be market shaping, but is looking more and more like procurement because things have to get done really quickly, and we're doing a lot of reactive commissioning. And we put in some quotes from commissioners when they gave us more information. So we need a commissioning approach that prioritises integration and flexibility rather than rigid short-term contracts. And we continued with our commissioner responses, so looking at the impact of delayed discharges and the human cost of those inefficiencies. 80% reported significant stress and trauma among people and their families due to delayed discharges. I would say that 80% stress, reporting stress on families is equal to 100% of those commissioners feeling the same stress and trauma because people are feeling like their hands are tied and they can't move the system along faster. We also heard about struggling to secure appropriate housing. 60% of commissioners finding it very difficult due to high costs and a lack of adaptable properties. Another big number noted an increased isolation and distrust in the health and social care system. We've certainly seen that over the last few years. There seems to be a lot more knocking heads over who's paying for what, and that slows things down hugely, as we know. So is there something we can look at around pooled budgets? What can we do differently? And of course, delayed discharges create additional pressure on support workers who really are at the front line of working in hospitals with people. And a lack of timely, appropriate discharge planning doesn't just delay hospital exits, it damages trust, well-being, and long-term stability. How often are we as commissioners putting in a discharge plan the minute someone gets admitted? How often is that happening? Probably not as consistently as it should be across the country because of time restraints and different people and different crises popping up. But there is there are a lot of high costs and hidden ones. So I came across an NHS England report recently that found that delayed discharges for people cost the system £100 million per year. That's a huge amount of money just because their discharge has been delayed. Similarly, a study from the LGA found that a placements failing due to inadequate support cost local authorities 30% more than well-planned community provision for people. And placement breakdowns cost an average of £150,000 per individual, not including the wider system costs of reassessments, crisis teams, and safeguarding interventions. So it's thinking about when something happens in the community, it's not just talking about commissioning the hourly rate of a provider. It's actually, you've got all of these professionals in the room trying to do a myriad of things to find solutions, find a new provider, find another property. All of that time costs a huge amount of money as well, but we don't tend to see those costs. And our responses around commissioners' priorities for improvement: 80% call for stronger leadership support, 60% want increased funding. I would say probably 100% want increased funding. We all do. 40% advocated for better workplace conditions and improved legislation to support sustainable care models. Improved legislation is one thing. It's having, I think the key word in here is sustainable. So making sure that the funding is there to be able to implement the legislation. Commissioners came back and spoke about wanting more training opportunities and more coaching opportunities to see where they can go and grow and develop within their role. And improved communication with care providers, 40%. And I love this quote: "We must move from reactive commissioning to proactive, co-produced," that's the key word, co-produced solutions that put people and families first. So this was kind of a summary that we pulled together from all of the responses across the survey. So we did see some improvements between the 2023 white paper and the 2024 white paper. The biggest improvement that we saw, just for insight, was in 2023. A lot of people spoke about wanting more training around autism. We didn't see that come through in 2024, and we suspect that's to do with the rollout of the Oliver McGowan mandatory autism training. So that is huge progress. This year's white paper shows slow progress when it comes to family involvement and co-production. Jen?
Sorry, you talked about the Oliver McGowan training. When you said it's mandatory, in what environments? Because I've been doing some benchmarking for shared lives and not all are delivering that. So I just wanted to check, really.
It should be anyone involved in frontline care. So we're talking about even when people go into hospital, the expectation is that the porters, that people in, working in the canteens, and that they have done that first phase of Oliver McGowan training, but the whole care sector should be.
So you'd expect the shared lives carers to take that. Okay,
yeah,
that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, and it does take time, and it's had a few teething issues with the rollout. We've had to obviously get a lot of people trained up within the workforce to deliver the training, and we want our experts by experience in the room as well. So it's taken time, but yes, we should all be seeing the impact of that. And we know that actually the incidence naturally is going up when it comes to autism spectrum. There are so many more of us in society that are neurodivergent than we ever realized. So delayed discharges, out of area placements continue to harm individuals and families. Make no mistake, it's a harm event for someone to move 300 miles away from home and then their family be denied access for whatever reason. We need a shift towards proactive, trauma-informed and personalised care. More funding needs to be, could be, should be released from inpatient spend for community-based support to reduce our system reliance on restrictive care settings. And we know that actually there are huge long-term cost benefits in commissioning those community options for people. I think it's about taking a long-term view, and I think that's what sometimes we struggle with, is we run on 5-year political cycles, so things aren't looked at, what's the impact of this community service going to be in 10 years' time? How many hospital admissions are we going to avoid as a result of what we've commissioned locally? And it, naturally, ensuring dignity, respect and rights-based approaches must be central to the future. So this is where I'm going to stay a little bit quieter, and I've put these questions on the screen. We don't need to run through them in order. It's just for you guys to have a look and then use this as a space just to throw ideas around, because there might be stuff that you guys are doing that others can learn from. There might be stuff that we can learn from each other. So does anyone want to jump in? Waiting to see who breaks the awkward silence first.
I was just thinking that I don't really get involved in the discharge pathway element, so it'd just be speculative, anything that I say.
Just to ask a question, what's the definition of small supports in small supports model?
Chris, you know all about there are a couple of different definitions when it comes to small supports.
Yeah, so so I work for the NDTI as well as part of the small supports program, because a lot of the small supports providers, they work with individual service funds, so it's a way of kind of helping them come into an area and set up. So the definition of small supports is really interesting because it came about from some work in the 90s with Partners for Inclusion and Inclusion Glasgow. Inclusion Glasgow. When they came to the rule of thumb, they came to was around 45 people. But actually, what was more important than that number was actually it's the point at which the people running the organisation or responsible for that group of people didn't know them all by name and know what was happening in their lives. So the sentiment was that small supports, the whole sentiment behind it was actually as organisations scale up, they start to lose quality because they lose track of the people they support slightly. So I was quite a big fan of that in the noughties, kind of as part of like a movement against corporate organisations, like obviously people like Lifeways and etc. big private providers that were focused more on profit than on people. But I think probably over the last few years, I've recognised it's not so much about the scale of the organisation, because I work with some brilliant organisations now who are really big. It's actually about their ethos, and it's their sort of application of management across an area, and how committed that management team is to the people they support and how well they know them and stuff like that. So, but that's where the concept of small supports came from. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand the definition, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
So are any of you guys working in discharge pathways and discharge planning?
Yes. It's short. We tend to look at individuals with regard to their individual needs, and we benefit from having sort of like a dynamic purchasing system, and we have a very well pronounced co-production processes within Slough. And we also have reviewed our strategies with regard to autism and LD, and basically we have a partnership board for each relevant service area. So we have people with lived experience attending and co-chairing the partnership boards for co-production and implementation of the strategies. They were involved in the production of the strategies, and now they're into the implementation phase, shall we say, of making it a reality. We are always, obviously, short of funds. So I think in actually quite an opportunistic way, yeah, it allows us to innovate and it encourages innovation. We have a very high percentage of our service users as a department receiving direct payments, many of whom it's not as high as I would like, but you know, we're getting there, shall we say. We're improving numbers of people employing their own PAs in the community. And as Chris knows, we're starting off a journey to look at ISFs and implement that in a larger way. At the moment, we've only got a couple of handful of people who are utilising ISFs, but others are using managed accounts, and so therefore they are actually increasing the amount of choice and control that they have with regard to the services that they receive. So in terms of the discharge planning, I think I'm going to say horses for courses. It's about the ability of the system at any one point in time to respond to the individual's needs and the choices offered to those individuals and their families in terms of being able to find more appropriate solutions rather than institutionalized care, to be quite honest. We have a very good we have an integrated model in Slough with regard to health and social care service. So we do have that benefit of integration to get a holistic service. But it's not perfect. Nowhere is. But we're on the road of continuous improvement, let's put it that way.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing all of that. And you know, the work around co-production, you mentioned that a lot of people with a learning disability with lived experience have been involved. Have families been involved in some of that work too?
Yes, carers. Yeah.
And do you think that I know you said that you're just going into the implementation phase, but has that given a little bit more confidence to some of the strategies and some of the decisions, having people's involvement from the beginning?
I think we've always been dedicated to do that. So, you know, we've always wanted to achieve that co-productive model, yeah, and so it's part of our ethos, and it's very difficult for us to act outside of that, if you see what I mean. It's more of the culture of our organisation to make sure, yeah, that we have engagement and also co-production, which of course is different. Yeah, and it's one thing to be engaged, but it's another to actually have co-production. So yeah, I mean we have a whole toolkit, and basically all of our professional colleagues in the social work arena, yeah, okay, are all committed to doing that, you know, ensuring that we go down co-productive routes. But obviously, occasionally, we come across situations that our aspirations can't yet be met, if you see what I mean, because of funding issues and all sorts. Yeah, but it's continuous improvement, so that's what we're committed to. I mean, the other thing is the Procurement Act 23 now gives us service user choice contracts. So that can be utilised quite significantly in this space. Because as you quite rightly pointed out earlier on in the slide deck, commissioners maybe have been, in inverted commas, restricted because of the procurement regulations and corporate design with regard to contract and procurement regulations within the organisations. But this new Procurement Act does really now open up the ability to implement service user choice contracts alongside any other forms of commissioning.
I think it's a game changer, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
It should be if implemented in the right way.
If it's implemented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you guys in Wolverhampton? Are there any particular blockers when it comes to discharge, or when it comes to even if we're not talking about hospitals, if we're talking about placement breakdowns and things, what do you find are the most challenging things apart from everything?
For me, I mean, we had a placement breakdown that was happening through Shared Lives, and I think what we did was work together across children's and adults, because it was a mother and baby placement, interestingly, so that was a really different, unique model that had worked quite well for some time, but broken down some point after baby came along and there was issues in terms of concerns, etc. And I think what we did was work together across commissioning children's, adults, and just looked at what those options were, if there were options to support the person to stay together with the child in another supportive environment, and looking at what those best, as I said, opportunities were in line with what mother wanted to do as well. So I think we do work quite collaboratively, and I think because we are now in the commissioning team, we're working now with health, so we're more integrated with health, children's and adults. So that is, it's still a work in progress, so it's not perfect, but the intention is to streamline those ways that we do work together and be able to overcome challenges that we experience a lot quicker and more collaboratively. So I think those are things that are difficult and there are challenges, but looking at ways to improve them in terms of, as I said, collaborative working is the way that we're trying to move forwards, particularly, as I said, with that ICB kind of health and social care linking.
No, thank you. And it does seem to be a lot easier when things are integrated and you're working with colleagues in health consistently, and you're able to build trust and build relationships. And then, of course, a few weeks later, people leave, new people come in, and then you're kind of back to that same cycle.
And I think what we're also looking at in Wolverhampton is where there are opportunities to do some joint commissioning, so we can commission together. So that's a new thing that we're trying to do, is those, where can we jointly commission? How can we expand the blueprint? Some of the things we're looking at is where are there opportunities to commission on a perhaps even a Black country level with particular services, so that service is a bit more streamlined and people's experiences aren't different depending on postcodes, etc. So those are things that we are exploring going forwards, but I wouldn't say it's perfect.
No,
I
and
think
you've got
one of the biggest challenges is affordable housing. If that could be solved, yeah, my goodness, we could have a lot more personalised care, and move away from quite a lot of the traditional models.
And you're right,
So,
and it's having the appropriate housing as well, isn't it? Because in
Yeah.
terms of people with physical disabilities, there's a real need or shortage out there in terms of your ground floor properties in particular as well.
yes,
Yeah, it's very, very tricky out there with property. I'd say, people talk about funding. We know that a lot comes down to funding, but having suitable accommodation seems to be the biggest missing piece of the puzzle. And I wish I had all the answers for that, apart from let's spend more money. Or as I say to the team, it's fine, we'll just print more money. It'll be great, it'll be fine. No, there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of blockers, and I think this network is, again, not about coming up with all of the answers, but about coming to the sessions and just picking the bits that are relevant to you guys as commissioners, as social workers, to be able to take things back to your teams. And I know that at Black Country level, I know that Wendy has been involved in some brilliant work at bringing people out of hospital that have been there almost their whole lives, that you might be aware of a couple of the people that I'm referring to through the work that you might have done in your team. But I think there is a real willingness there to change things and to level up the way that we do things. And of course, we're going to have to learn how to do more with less. And that is what the LDA Commissioners Network Conference is going to be about, as we said. And we'll send out some more information about that. Are there any other questions that you guys have that Chris and I might be able to help or support with regarding this group of people, just kind of while we're here? I know that you guys don't work directly on discharges, but we might be able to help with any more info or insight onto things like ISFs and that kind of thing.
Do you know of any shared life schemes that are using ISFs?
So
That's the bit.
it's a good question. Yeah, no, Essex are exploring this quite recently. I think before Christmas. Do you know Sarah Ebdale? Have you come across Sarah? She's in our
No.
ISF network. I don't know where they got to with it, but they certainly were looking at it. I mean, ISF is a commissioned arrangement, so any arrangement where you have a contract with I think the difficulty was that it's generally the contract is with an organisation, so the shared lives carer would have to be, if it was delivered through another organisation, if that makes sense, that could hold the budget, then probably. But if it was, so it really depends on the contracting arrangement for the shared lives carer. There's nothing saying you can't do an ISF for any type of arrangement, but it's held by an organisation on behalf of the person, so it has to be the organisation that holds it.
So the shared lives provider could potentially hold that ISF anyway.
So if it's out, so if it's external, because I know some people have in-house shared lives.
So if it's commissioned,
if it's commissioned, then you could. If it's in-house,
but if it's in-house, that would create. That's an interesting point, actually. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
It also depends on the contractual arrangements with the shared life provider, because in Slough we said that the shared lives provider should carry out all of the disbursements to the shared lives carers, but in some contracts the shared lives provider doesn't act as the person the entity that's paying the shared lives carer. In some areas, the local authority pays direct to the shared lives carer. So it depends on your contractual arrangement.
Thank you. It's handy. Thank you very much.
I'm quite interested, sorry to like make it about me, but I'm really interested, Suzanne, in terms of that user choice contract stuff and how that's been applied in practice. Are you doing that in Slough yet?
We're at the current stage where we probably would say that we've been doing it for quite some time. Because we would have trumped the procurement regulations, the old procurement regulations under light touch regime, and therefore opened us up to the realms of direct award as on the basis of service user choice. So we have been doing that for quite some time, but now, of course, this opens up the arena much wider, and we won't be constrained as much by well, if I said more traditional open competition element, yeah. And so we're discussing that with our corporate procurement colleagues at the moment to really get the internal regulations, procedure rules in line with what we need to do. And we're just looking at the impact on the reporting of that, because obviously the transparency reporting needs to be tight in order for us to achieve that. So we're looking at the impact in terms of what we need to do in order, and where staffing needs to be placed, and the reporting activity undertaken. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We still continue to do exactly what we've been doing before, but we also are putting it into the new Procurement Act processes.
Interesting. I was going to say, you don't have a process map around that, do you? Just, I think that'd be something that'd be really fascinating to in our commissioning network stuff, because this comes up a lot around notional budgets, because really the spirit of the Care Act is that people are supposed to be able to choose their support organisation, but we know that's really variable as a postcode lottery, isn't it, by councils, to be honest. And some councils, it's pen picture, the person goes in, back comes some bids from providers, sometimes about money, sometimes it's quality, sometimes it's both. And then sometimes the person doesn't really get a great choice of provision that comes back in. And we know that's not good from a systemic point of view. That's not good, because obviously some people just need that.
We see the ISF. We see the ISF as a means of actually promoting a huge number of increased choice. Yeah. Yeah. And then on top of that, we know that, you know, for example, support around accommodation, people have the right to choose where they live, to obviously to a certain extent because of court of protection or ministerial justice and all the rest. But anyway, apart from those instances, you know, people do have the right to choose where they live, and therefore we, you know, see that as enabling us to move forward in a very, very significant way. And I can't say it now. Someone say it for me. Legitimizes. I don't know. Can't say it now. Legitimizes the decisions that are being made, and we're doing the workflow processes at the moment. Yeah, we haven't finished them yet, but as soon as they're finished, I will definitely share with the network, and perhaps you can disseminate. So.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I think that'd be really good, because I think that some of these concepts, they're quite scary, but when you see them as practical step-by-step processes, I think everybody would be really interested in that. Because I want to know, like, is it a contract between the user and the provider? Like, how do you do that mechanism? How does that person feed into the choice of their provider? Well, I think that kind of stuff would be amazing.
For me, I think there's several different routes in, yeah, and I think that we don't want to just do one particular kind of ISF, if you see what I mean. We want to make it a very nice broad spectrum, right from the direct payment, the managed account services, the ISF where the fund is held by a provider that is providing the care to the individual, yeah, but also beyond that in terms of an ISF broker function as well. So, you know, in other words, the whole spectrum is what we're after, really.
Yeah, awesome. But outside of ISFs as well, so if people don't want an ISF for whatever reason, they could still choose their provider through that process.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Under the service user choice contracts.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the bit. So I think that would be amazing to explore that at perhaps a future session if you're up for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.